keep promising to do this. I do intend to one day. I want to rank corporate media show hosts. But if I did that, towards the top would be Chris Hayes. He's usually he's a reliable guy for doing a version of what the Damage Report does within the what corporate media would consider acceptable bounds. He interviewed Dan Kildee. He's from Michigan's 5th District. That's in Flint. On the IRS's failure to audit Donald Trump. IRS was obligated to perform an audit while Trump was in office, and they didn't. They had a very interesting take on that. Let's listen to Chris Hayes.
Congressman Dan Kildee is a Democrat of Michigan. He sits on the House Ways and Means Committee, which obtained Donald Trump's tax returns, and he joins me now. I guess first my question, Congressman, is did you think this day would actually come?
Well, it was a long time coming. First of all, thanks again for having me back on the show. You know, we started soon after Democrats took control of the House to begin to look at the big questions that had gone unanswered. This was a big one. It was in April of that year that Chairman Neal sent the letter. We expected President Trump and the entire administration to push back and to use delay tactics. After all, that has been his method in just about every aspect of his business enterprises, to delay, to try to outweight people on the other side of the negotiating table. I was just grateful that ultimately the Supreme Court ruled in this case in time for us to finish our work before Republicans take control. I don't want to project what they may do, but my expectation is that they'll continue to defend Donald Trump. I was suspecting we never get to it, and I was really pleased that we were able to finally get to this.
So I want to get into a little bit of the substance, but before we get there, first of all, let's talk about Charles Reddick. He's the individual who ran the IRS. He was appointed by Donald Trump. He quite famously wrote a defense of Donald Trump not releasing his taxes during the campaign, when that's a standard thing candidates do. And we should note here that presidents do it and have been doing it going back decades. It's a standard thing presidents show. It's an important thing for transparency's sake. I feel like I got a lot of questions about Charles Reddick
Yeah. We talked about this days and days ago, but Reddick owns two properties in Waikiki that are Trump branded. Trump branded means if Trump's reputation goes, it's got Donald Trump's name on the side. So if Trump's reputation goes down, his properties are worth less money. This guy's made millions off of them. Let's see if Hayes is onto that.
And learned of the fact that in violation, I think, of federal law, his agency had not audited Donald Trump while he was the head of the IRS. Do you have some questions for him?
We do have a lot of questions. And just to be clear, it has been the practice of the IRS since 1977, when they put into their own operating manuals the mandatory audit of the president of the United States. But it hasn't been a law, and that's one of the reasons that we sought this inquiry in the first place, to determine what and to what extent we may need to take action legislatively.
Okay. Again, I don't know why they can't speak in normal talk. Breaking that down, it has been the practice of the IRS, as in they said, hey, we're going to start doing this. They said within their department, this is going to be the norm. The U.S. relies on tradition and norms and policy, but not law, for regulating its powerful people. And you wonder why its powerful people so regularly dodge getting into trouble. He's saying legislatively we need to look at this. No shit. Dan Kildee is in my state. I will likely be writing him to say, yes, of course. What do you mean think about? What do you mean think about? You shouldn't be on national television saying, maybe we should make this an official rule. Yes, we should make this an official rule. This should be the law. Yes. that it's mandatory to do this. We've been doing it since 1977. Obviously, we think it's important. It should be punishable, I would say, by jail time at the very least, to fail to do this.
To do what we all thought the IRS had been doing all along. Our suspicion was he was not being audited by the IRS.
Yeah.
And of course, our suspicions were proven to be the case. Those questions go directly to Mr. Reddick. Why didn't he do his job? Why didn't he do what the IRS operating manual requires? And of course, that's a question that we can speculate about. We hope to be able to get to some of these answers at some point in time. But it is curious to note that during the entire presidency of Barack Obama, his tax returns were audited annually. President Biden's tax returns, since President Trump has left, audited. That 4-year period when Donald Trump was president, it wasn't until the Ways and Means Committee opened our inquiry that they even began the process of audit and never completed a single audit of Donald Trump when he was president of the United States.
It was the very day that the inquiry was made that an audit was started. Pathetic.
There's a reason for that. And I think we can speculate as to what that reason might be. We don't have facts to confirm it, but it is a curiosity that only during the 4 years of the Trump presidency, when Donald Trump, with all of his business interests, could have been, significantly manipulating the process, only during that period were those returns not audited.
Yeah, and I just want to restate, thank you for that correction, just to be clear. So I said federal law. It's not federal law. It's IRS policy since 1977 as part of the mandatory, but for the IRS, it's the policies the IRS has, right? So It's not mandated by federal law, but they've been doing it for a very long time, and they're doing it in the aftermath of Nixon, of course, where there's a lot of tax stuff going on. That, that Barack Obama gets audited, Joe Biden gets audited, Donald Trump doesn't. And the cherry on top of this, of course, is that his excuse for not releasing them is precisely he's being audited. And yet it now turns out that it was actually the inverse of the truth, right? That he was like the one president not audited at the time that he was saying that, contrary to every other president, he could not release his tax returns.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it wasn't true that he was being audited when he said it was. Secondly, there's nothing that prohibits any person, right, especially the president of the United States, from releasing their tax returns, even if they're under audit. He claimed that he wanted to be transparent. He clearly did not. And the question is, why not? Is it because, A, there are things in those returns that are questionable, that, at least as I went through the returns, they seemed very questionable to me? Or even, least case scenario, he was simply embarrassed by the fact that he's a pretty poor businessman. And the only thing he's ever been able to do effectively is inherit money and spend it.
Yeah, that last point about the sort of role the inheritance played, which was a huge part of that incredible New York Times reporting when they got the earlier tax returns, actually shows up again while he's in the presidency. A huge windfall that he gets from Daddy, who is, of course, departed. But even after death, he manages to get that. And it's more money than a lot of the other putative operating businesses are making. Congressman Dan Kildee, who sits on the Ways and Means Committee, which, credit where due, got it done under the wire, turning in the paper, 12 hours before the deadline. Thank you, Congressman.
Among the first times I have seen Democrats do anything of use in terms of holding Republicans accountable for anything at all while in office. We are living through the worst of times, it's true, but in some senses, we are also living through the best of times. Because Democrats are discovering that they too have teeth. It is really cool to see that. They require constant pressure from their constituents, unfortunately. However, we have the ability to provide that pressure, and we should. I frequently say, contact your representative. Essentially, just bitch at them. Take a page out of the Republican playbook. They don't even need to know what is going on around them to demand things from their politicians. They don't even need to have a firm grasp of reality to demand things from their politicians. And it works time and time and time and time again. We see centrist Dems get befuddled after they get in office and say, maybe I'm going to be a little bit more middle of the road than I said I was. Maybe I'm going to be a little bit more straight up right wing than I said I was. Part of that is corruption in the form of bribes from super PACs, yes. But a lot of that is also that their inbox gets flooded with messages from what they believe to be their constituents. And they hear that. I say this having interviewed them. I'll go on that in a second. They hear that and they think that is a larger percentage of the voters in their area than it is. It's simply not culturally a habit of progressives to bother people. Bother people. Start bothering people. Get familiar with the process of contacting your representative and be loud about things you care about. Just pick one issue. Pick one issue a week. How about that? And write an email. It's that easy. It has an effect. It genuinely does. Fortunately, there is such criminality on the right these days that Democrat inaction has become unacceptable. As well it should. As well it should.